Facebook Live, or if you're watching this later, we're excited to have so much interest in Kentucky pollinators. And this session is all about preserving Kentucky's pollinators. We've got two wonderful speakers that I'm really excited to hear from the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. And let me jump in here. Just quick meeting reminders. This session is being recorded. If you only catch part of this or you want to check it out later or share it, we appreciate that. You can find it on our Curry's Fork Watershed Facebook page or our Curry's Fork Watershed YouTube page. And I'll be sure to share it with the speakers as well. Feel free to turn your cameras off while the presentations are going and to just make sure you've muted yourself as well during that time. Questions are definitely welcome. Feel free to put those in the chat or either on Facebook, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the session. So my name is Becca Truman. I'm the watershed coordinator for the Curry's Fork Watershed. We're here in Oldham County, and a lot of the work we do has to do with pollinators because we are trying to help improve the waterways that we have here in the Curry's Fork Watershed. The waters here in this area have some water quality impairments, and the Curry's Fork Watershed, which you might not be familiar with, ends up going into Floyd's Fork, which more people are familiar with the Floyd's Fork Watershed down into Jefferson County. So for pollinators, this has been a really wonderful initiative to increase participation, increase excitement about helping nature, helping wildlife, and improving our waterways. So I just wanted to give a very quick synopsis of some of the work that we're doing. We do have a couple of volunteer groups that we are meeting from every month to scattered times. We're still trying to find the best times to meet, but we have our monthly Friends of Curry's Fork group, and then we also have a pollinator garden group. And anybody is welcome to participate in these, and we're kind of navigating between in-person and online. A few things that through our programming and through volunteers we've been able to do include planting a community pollinator garden and rain barrel demonstration space. This is at the Welcome Center in LaGrange, so I'd encourage anybody in that area to check it out. It's a really beautiful space, and every week when I check it out, it looks a little bit different, and that's really exciting to see. We had a seed swap last fall, so we've got a bunch of people together and collected seeds either on our own, or we went to Udell. They have a wonderful meadow. That's actually the picture you can see behind me. And we went to the farmer's market and we gave out seeds. So we're hoping to kind of keep doing this every year. The picture on the bottom middle there. So part of our programming is to help fix septic systems. So we've decided to add in the idea of planting a pollinator meadow on these newly fixed septic sites. And then the bottom right there, you'll see this is a rain garden that we worked with Udell to plant. So if you go to Udell, be sure to check out the rain garden. And then last bit of news here. So working with the LaGrange Public Library, the library is a recipient of the Plant Wildflowers grant. This was a national library-based grant. And we just got news of this a couple of weeks ago. Really exciting. So just wanted to give you that information that we're going to be having a community-wide initiative with several partners to try to expand pollinator gardens and interest in pollinators and planting these gardens. And we're really excited about this. So just stay tuned for more information. If this interests you, we're going to have a kickoff event at the library on March 31st. We'll be doing a pollinator garden planting and distributing wildflower seeds, as well as doing at least one bio blitz this year. And we definitely want as many people who are interested in participating to help us with this. So I mentioned my position a little bit with Oldham County. If anybody is interested in helping to volunteer, both for tree plantings, pollinator plantings, helping to care for these spaces, the volunteers are really what's going to make this be what we're hoping to have it be, which is really a community-wide effort to get more people to understand pollinator gardens and take that interest. And our socials are right here for Curry's Fork, so we're on Facebook and YouTube. All right, I'm really excited for these speakers today. So we have Tony Romano. Tony is an environmental scientist or a botanist with the Office of Kentucky State Nature Preserves, and he's with the plant conservation section. Tony is most involved in native plant monitoring and botanical inventories. So we're going to hear about some of the roadside inventories that their office is doing. And then Shelby Fulton, who's going to kick it off. She is a terrestrial zoologist or an entomologist with the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, and she's with the biological assessment branch. And Shelby is most focused on monitoring of insects, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and turtles. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Shelby. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
All right, thank you for the introduction. And go ahead and get my screen shared. All right, so like Becca said, I'm Shelby. I'm a zoologist with the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. I primarily am an entomologist. I work with all kinds of invertebrates. My specialties are butterflies, moths, and increasingly bees as well. I do work with vertebrates at times, but pollinators are very near and dear to my heart, so I'm thrilled to be here talking to you about them today. I'm going to give you a quick overview of Kentucky pollinators, sort of what they are, why they're important, as well as how you can support them in settings as small as your own backyard. First, I just want to tell you a little bit about my agency, if you're not too familiar with it. We're the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. I'm not going to read you this list, but here is a list of our official duties. This is all available on our website as well, if you would like to check these out in more detail. We have properties all over the state, some that we own, some that we provide financial support or management support to in other capacities. You can see here that we are broadly distributed in the state of Kentucky, and it's been a great opportunity to get to work in so many amazing environments. This probably won't apply to anybody in this talk, but we do have a biological assessment tool available on our website. If you're not quite sure what that means, you probably aren't someone who needs it just yet. But this has a lot to do with planning projects, large scale projects, compliance, things like that. So that's available on our website. All right, so first of all, there are many types of pollinators. Butterflies, moths, beetles, bees, all kinds of insects can be effective pollinators. These are just 3 photos that I've taken around the state. The first one you can see is a moth. It's a type of moth that we sometimes call the hummingbird moths because they fly during the day and they move like hummingbirds. They sort of have this fluttery, hovering motion while they will consume nectar from flowers. In the middle, we have a beetle consuming nectar. I believe the species of beetle actually does consume some pollen as well. But nevertheless, pollen will still attach to the mouth parts and the body of that species and will get transferred as it approaches different flowers. And of course, we have the classic butterfly nectaring on some milkweed. But even tiny flies can be pollinators. So a lot of it has to do with how effective a pollinator is going to be. And that comes down to the shape of the bug's actual mouth and how that lines up with the shape of an actual flower. So not everything is a good pollinator, a very effective pollinator. And that's something that I'll come back to in a little bit. It wouldn't be a pollinator talk if we didn't mention honeybees. There's a lot to love about honeybees. One thing that people aren't always very clear on is that they actually aren't native to Kentucky or even the United States. They were introduced to North America in the early 17th century by Europeans. And of course, they're extremely important, particularly to our agricultural sector. Their annual crop production has been valued at more than $15 billion. Honeybees today have been recorded in about 89% of pollination networks in their native range and up to 61% here in their introduced range. But there are some downsides here. So there's limited research about this, But what evidence is out there suggests that honeybees may sometimes be out competing our native bees for pollen and nectar resources. And that's not great. There's also a disease transmission effect. And this goes both ways, both from honeybees to native bees and from native bees to honeybees. I've heard it described as thinking of flowers like shared dinner plates. So you've got all of these bees converging on these resources, and it's sort of like everyone licking the plate at the same time. So when they're all feeding on that same resource, pathogens inevitably get shared. And it's also worth considering that while honeybees are incredible pollinators, they're just not capable of pollinating every single plant. Next, we'll talk a little bit about what native bees are. So we've just talked about the most well-known of our non-native bees, but our native bees can live and look quite differently. About 70% of our native bees actually are ground nesting, and almost all of the remaining 30% live in pre-existing holes. We do have some that will build nests on the outside of structures, but it's not very common. And bumblebees are actually our only native hive formers. Most of our bees are solitary, but at times they will form aggregations or communal nests. But even within those nests, they'll live in separate solitary chambers, and they're not going to contribute to the rearing of each other's young. But many of our sweat bees, like the one I have pictured here, are semi-social. They may share nests and cooperatively provide for offspring, but a big difference between them and honeybees is that only one generation is going to persist at a time. Bumblebees and some sweat bees are eusocial, which is a term that refers to that sort of complex honeybee type of life history that we think of. But even so, they're not going to have that strong social structure to as high a degree as honeybees do. One of the things that's so important about native honeybees, you should know from what I've already told you that that is not a thing. Honeybees are not native to North America. But one thing that's very important about our native bees is that they do all of that pollination for free. You don't have to purchase them. You don't have to do anything for them. There are things you can do to support them and that we absolutely should do, but they're out there doing all of that work because it's simply how they operate. And they are the most efficient pollinators of certain crops that are extremely important, both as parts of our diet and for animal feed. So things like squash, tomatoes, and apples are not well pollinated by honeybees. There's a bee native called the squash bee that's responsible for almost all of the pollination of our native squashes, pumpkin, things like that. Early in the morning, if you look at squash blossoms, you can sometimes find them down in the flower. Native bees also have a longer daily foraging period than honeybees, as well as a greater weather tolerance. So they're more likely to be out doing that pollination when the weather is bad, earlier in the day, later in the day. And this gives them more opportunity to complete that process. Unfortunately, our native bees are struggling in many ways. According to NatureServe, up to 47% of our leafcutter bees may be at risk. Up to 27% of our mason bees may be at risk. And up to 22% of our bumblebees may be at risk as well. Regarding bumblebees, another source, a joint report by the Xerces Society and IUCN has estimated up to 28% of bumblebees may be threatened. But there's a lot you can do to contribute to solving this problem. So this is a big graphic. This is available on the Xerces Society's website. I'll be sharing a link to that in a moment, but this is a guide for how to best manage your own property for bumblebees. And just to summarize, all pollinators, bumblebees, butterflies, all of it will benefit extensively from ensuring that you have native plants that are going to be blooming year-round. So if you really want to support pollinators on your property, It's great to have all of these beautiful blooms in the summer, but we really need to make sure that there are those nectar resources available through the spring and into the fall as well, which in my experience sometimes gets left out of the equation. So it's really important to make sure that there are food resources available continuously. Another key point that is in this graphic is don't be afraid to leave some of the uglier parts of your property, of your lawn, things like down trees, dead leaves, things like that can be really important nest sites and overwintering sites for all kinds of pollinators. Another key component is bare ground. Remember, like I said, 70% of our native bees are ground nesters, and it's really important that they have that bare ground to complete their life cycle. This doesn't get incorporated into a lot of pollinator gardens because it's not necessarily the most attractive to have big patches of sand or of scraped dirt. But it's a great way to support what you may already have flying around out there. Lastly, a key point here is when you are conducting your more intensive habitat management practices, whether that's herbiciding or even prescribed fire, make sure that you're not treating the entire property at the same time. And this can get really difficult if you're working with a really small amount of land, but if you have the option to divide things up into sections, you can always leave one section that's not currently being treated so that things can retreat back to that untouched section while the other sections are being managed. More about providing nesting sites. So there's all kinds of artificial structures you can use. In these photos are mason bee homes, sometimes called bee hotels. And these are really great. Like I said previously, our mason bees are some of our, we believe, most imperiled native bees. You do need to do regular maintenance on these to make sure that they stay clean, because just like people, when you have a lot of people in a confined space for a really long time, you're going to get germ spreading. So these do need to be sanitized. And you do also want to keep an eye on these and make sure you don't have like paper wasps moving in. Those would need to be cleared out as well. You can also create similar structures with a more natural aesthetic. So like I already mentioned, like a sand pit, a scraped ground kind of thing can be great. I've even heard of people who have like cut tree stumps on their property, and they'll take a power drill and drill some of those little holes like you see in these bee hotels into that stump. And that can be a great nest site for native bees as well. You can pick these up many places. Sometimes garden centers will have them. And I've found that a lot of beekeepers who are really interested in native bee conservation as well will actually make these. I have seen these for sale at a lot of farmers markets, at a lot of beekeeping events as well. So definitely keep an eye out for these. So I mentioned the Xerces Society a few times. This is the Xerces Society for Pollinator Conservation, for Invertebrate Conservation. I apologize. The general URL is down here in the corner. It's just www.xerces.org. This is a really great organization, and it has tons and tons of resources that everyone who's interested can benefit from. You can actually go to their website, search by region. We're in their Southeast region, and they have everything from lists of plant species that benefit pollinators, sorted by their bloom time, by their environmental tolerance. They'll walk you through habitat assessments that you can do even in your backyard. You can find tips on pollinator identification. There's a great new publication out for free that's available on their website to show you how to identify bumblebees in the eastern US. They've got information on how to use pesticides and herbicides with minimal risk to your pollinators. So I highly recommend checking that out. And of course, if you have any further questions, you can contact me. My email address is on my title slide. And since this presentation is being recorded, you can always go back and get that email address again. So now that we've had a chance to go on this sort of whirlwind tour of Kentucky's pollinators, with an emphasis on the bees. I hope that you've gained a better understanding of how you can contribute to ongoing conservation work in your own backyard and in your own garden. So we're going to move on now to my colleague Tony, who's going to talk to you about how pollinator conservation is evolving at broader scales, particularly how we're dealing with that at the state government level. Thanks, y'all. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thanks, Shelby. And thanks, Becca, for hosting today. Happy to give this talk. I'm going to go ahead and pull my presentation up. Okay, so like I said, my name is Tony Romano, and I'm a botanist with the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. And so today I'm going to be talking about our recent work looking to identify and move towards protection of remnant grasslands and pollinator habitat along Kentucky's roadsides. So many of you may not realize this, but Kentucky used to have a large amount of grasslands throughout the state. And so grasslands is kind of a catch-all term, includes things like prairies, glades, barrens, woodlands, savannas, all these different types of vegetation communities that where the herbaceous layer, so the ground layer, is dominated by grass species. So I'm going to say grassland a lot, but I'm really referring to kind of all those different gradations of grassland dominated habitat types. And so these used to be much more common. And we're going to take a look at a map of what that used to look like. But unfortunately, nowadays, grasslands are increasingly rare in Kentucky. They're one of our rarest natural communities. And oddly enough, roadsides have gained importance not just in Kentucky, but also nationwide, because people have realized that a lot of our remaining grasslands actually occur in roadside habitats. And so these roadside remnants are providing refugia for some of our more conservative or rare prairie plant species. There's a few reasons for this. One of them is that roadsides are maintained in an open state through mowing. And so this helps to reduce woody encroachment from trees and shrub species. So it keeps them open. Historically, things like fire and large herds of grazing animals were the disturbance mechanism that did that. Nowadays, mowing is one of the processes that does that. And then these sites also historically have been generally protected from tilling and from further development. And I have a good example about a roadside being protected from development later on in this talk. And then roadsides have also increasingly been recognized for their potential importance for conservation of pollinator habitat. And that includes at-risk pollinator insects. In Kentucky, that would include the monarch, the rusty patch bumblebee, and also the rattlesnake master borer moth. And there's some good news here because research has indicated that roadsides with diverse native plants also help support higher insect diversity and abundance. So if we're able to protect these high quality native grassland remnants, we'll be kind of accomplishing two goals at once of conserving our native plant diversity and also our pollinating insects and insect diversity. Okay, so this map is a approximation of pre-settlement land cover in Kentucky. And I want to draw your attention to the sort of brownish gray color in the western part of the state. That historically is thought to be prairie during the pre-settlement period. And this is based mostly on a variety of sources, but many of them include maps and literature from the first settlers in the area that indicated large areas of grassland dominated communities. If we step forward into the present, we see that that area has largely been converted to cropland, right? Grasslands tend to build really great soils. So these are often the first places to be converted into productive agricultural fields. A lot of the other grasslands in the state have been converted to pasture and shrublands. And so pastures, while they may include lots of grasses, unfortunately, they've often been converted into cool season pasture grasses that were introduced from Europe for the purposes of raising cattle and other livestock. So they don't have the same quality that our native warm season grasslands once had. And I think this map really underscores the importance of this project to try and find the remaining native Kentucky grasslands that we still have. So in light of all of this, our agency has partnered with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, KYTC. We have started a 5-year project to identify and evaluate remnant habitats, rare plant species, and pollinator resources on all of the state maintained roads. So that's interstates, US highways, and Kentucky highways. Unfortunately, our surveys don't include smaller local roads like county level and municipal roads, but there'll be a way for you to help with that later on in this talk. And so as you can see on this map, KYTC divides the state into 12 districts. Each year, we're trying to survey 2 to 3 districts. We started this project in 2020 in the blue colored counties. So that was KYTC District 3, a portion of 4 in District 5. And that actually really corresponds with that historical map showing where prairies used to be in the state. This past year in 2021, we worked in mostly the Southeast, so District 8 and 11, and we also finished off District 4. And then this year, we'll be working exclusively in Western Kentucky. So each year we rotate to a new spot. And so if we take a closer look at that, I can kind of talk about what our approach has been. So the map I'm showing here is those counties we surveyed in the first year. And as you can see, all those roads on there, this is a really road dense part of the state. It had about 7,000 miles of road that we were surveying. And so the question is, well, gosh, how are you going to do that? That's a lot of roadway to take a look at. So we did a few things to help us prioritize important areas. And one of them was to look at our existing documented records of rare plants and prairie species occurring on roadways. So that's what all those green dots are. We have those in a database. Our agency maintains a database of rare plant locations throughout the state. So that was a pretty simple exercise to get an idea of where we should maybe look. After that, we did a lot of desktop analysis, looking at aerial photos, topography, our natural areas inventory, and then I did a whole bunch of digital driving using the Google Street View function. And so you can see some screenshots from that. It's kind of what it sounds like. I was just stepping my way down the road on Google Earth all winter, trying to find sites of interest. And so that photo on the left is a pretty typical roadside. That photo is from the winter time, and you can see all that green grass. That's a good indicator that that roadside is probably converted to native pasture, or I'm sorry, to non-native pasture grasses. So that sort of road would get a lower priority in our process. The photo on the right, that's in the summertime. It looks a little bit weedy, but there's enough structural diversity there that we would maybe flag that as a road to take a closer look at when we're on the highways. And so for data collection, what we did is we've adapted the rapid assessment method that was developed by the Monarch Joint Venture. The Monarch Joint Venture is a great organization working to promote monarch conservation and providing tools to help people do that. It utilizes Survey 123, and that is a mobile app program that allows you to build custom data forms and populate them in the field and share them automatically to a database. So this is a great way to standardize our data collection and also make it easy to share with Monarch Joint Venture in the future. We wanted to make sure that we were covering all our bases. So we also incorporated some additional grassland assessment criteria that the original tool developed by NJV didn't quite include. And then we also developed a citizen science project with iNaturalist that I will touch on towards the end of this talk. And so our hope is that we'll end up with a baseline of high quality remnant habitats throughout the state. We'll use that information to inform the management of those sites by KYTC and hopefully produce better outcomes. And we're also working to provide trainings for KYTC staff so that hopefully this doesn't become a kind of one and done project. So now we'll take a look at how we did. So here's our current progress map. You can see all the blue colored lines are all the roads we have surveyed to date. It's about 13,000 miles of road. Primarily myself and 2 colleagues have done the vast majority of those surveys. And then all of those gold stars are sites where we stopped to conduct an assessment. So something piqued our interest as we were traveling the road that caused us to pull over. And As you can see, we evaluated over 200 sites. And out of those sites, we had 140 that either had a rare species that was present, or there was some other kind of grassland indicator species that was caused to pull over and take a closer look. And of those, 62 of those sites with grassland indicators were found in 2020. This past year, we found 84 sites with some kind of grassland indicator. And out of all of those, we identified over 30 sites with high quality conservation value. That high quality category is kind of based on size, the presence of rare species, what the threats are, things like noxious weeds and things like that are taken into consideration, and the overall composition of the plant community. And I think this kind of underscores that high quality sites are really thin on the ground. There's not a lot of these. They're kind of diamonds in the rough, which makes this project really important. And I'm happy to be working on it now. So I'm gonna kind of go through some of the rare plant updates we've done, but I just wanted to point out kind of an interesting statistic. So in Kentucky, there's approximately 2,900 plant species throughout the state. And in 2020, we documented 529 species right on the side of the road. In 2021, we documented 685 plant species on the side of the road. And when we add those together and then subtract out all the duplicates, we had a total of 820 species observed through the course of this project. So that's about a third of Kentucky's flora that has been documented right on the side of state highways. I think this really does show that roadsides are habitat. They do support our native flora, they support our native insects. And it's really important to consider them land that needs to be managed well if we want to continue to support those things. And so shifting to rare plants, I'm going to kind of go through these tables briefly because there's a few things going on, but the top portion of that table where it says rare plant populations, those are different occurrences of rare plants on our roadsides. In 2020, we were able to update 37 of them, and then we updated even more populations in 2021. So those are records of rare plants that we knew about beforehand, and we were able to go back and confirm, yes, it's still there. It still exists. And then below that, we have our new populations. So we had 16 in 2020 and even more again in 2021. And then this bottom half of the table is our rare plant species. So the top is populations, the bottom is species. And you can see that over the course of the 2 years, we've been able to provide updated or new information about 62 different species of rare plants that occur in the state. So this is really great work. And again, I can only imagine that these numbers are going to grow as this project continues. So I'm just going to kind of go through some examples of those so that I can put some pictures on here instead of graphs. So some of these new finds were made just this past year, like that one on the far left, Clematis glaucophylla. So it's a native clematis that is relatively rare in Kentucky. It's known from only a handful of counties. It resembles some of our more common species, but it has really thick whitened leaves on the bottom and those really cherry red flowers. The one in the center is wild blue indigo. You can sometimes find this commercially, but like true native remnant populations of this are very rare in Kentucky, primarily restricted to Western Kentucky on soils that haven't been tilled. So this is an increasingly rare species in our state. And then the one on the right is Symphyotrichum pratense, or Barron's silky aster. It's one of our aster species. This one usually occurs in remnant barrens communities with really rocky soils. So that was a great find from Hart County last year. And then I have a few more rare species updates. I included this one because it's not a pretty flower and it doesn't necessarily have great pollinator resources. This is ring seed rush. So it's a member of the rush family. But I thought it was important to show that, while we are looking for pollinator habitat, we also are looking for things like this that are rare species that are sometimes hard to see and are easily forgotten in our conservation efforts. So this species this population occurred in a really shallow roadside ditch. You can see it in the foreground of the photo on the right. And This is another population of the same species occurring in a little roadside swale right off of the pavement. So this is the sort of thing that's really easy to miss and can very easily be impacted by something like herbicide application on the side of the road. And this other rare species is Appalachian rosinweed, so Silphium waziotense, tripping over my tongue. But so this species I included because it's not a grassland species. So this is another kind of unique situation. We consider this to be sort of a forest edge species. So it thrives on south-facing roadsides in southeastern Kentucky. From Kentucky, it's known from Clay, Leslie, and Pike counties, and it's known from a couple counties in Tennessee, but nowhere else in the world. So it's a globally rare plant that's entirely dependent on our roadsides currently. So I think it really shows that while we're talking mostly about grasslands, we are incorporating other aspects and trying to think holistically about conserving our roadside flora. And also that these plants do provide pollinator resources, even if they're not necessarily a grassland. I also included this one because it shows a good example of management situations that we're trying to improve. So this is the habitat for this species. And as you can see, there's all that dead vegetation in the foreground. And that's because it was sprayed during regular maintenance operations. They were using herbicide to reduce the vegetation on this steep embankment along the roadside. Fortunately, most of the population occurred slightly above the spray line, so we're confident that it'll recover okay. And we're working with the district maintenance folks to get new signs put up to hopefully prevent this kind of thing. So again, this is kind of underscoring the importance of this project to move us in a better direction of managing these habitats that occur along our roadsides. And then this last little highlight is Symphyotrichum puniceum. So this is another one of our aster species. This one is a wet meadow specialist. You can see it has a kind of that red stem and very thick white hairs that make it pretty easy to identify if you're working on your aster identification skills. And I included this one just to show two examples of habitats. So on the left, you can see I parked my truck in the mowed part of the right-of-way. And this species occurred just off of that in the unmowed section, along like a narrow 5 or 6 foot wide swath of habitat. So some of these rare species occur in really narrow, vulnerable habitats. On the photo on the right, you can see it occurring right on the edge of the pavement. So a lot of these things are tough, they're persisting, but they do occur in vulnerable situations. And that's just kind of the theme of this part of the talk. So I'm just gonna have a few more statistics and then I'll kind of talk about some ways that you all can help us. So I'm gonna show a couple graphs here. These are the size of our roadside habitats that we've identified over the past few years. And the key takeaway is just that most of these remnants are very small. The average size is about a 1/4 acre. And the largest site is about 55 acres, but that's a very special case. That includes an 11-mile stretch up the Little Shepherd Trail, which is almost entirely on public land. So it's kind of an outlier in the work that we've been doing. But the vast majority are in 2020 were well under an acre. And then in 2021, we see a similar trend where most of our sites are less than a 1/2 acre, but we have this big increase in sites over an acre. And there's actually a pretty straightforward explanation for this. In 2021, we surveyed a lot of roads that are within the Daniel Boone National Forest. And so that kind of accounts for that increase because the Daniel Boone has large areas of contiguous habitat that they've been working to do a good job maintaining as open and remnant grassland friendly. So that's kind of what accounts for that big jump in sites this past year. We're kind of expecting that number to go back down this year when we move into Western Kentucky, but you never know, maybe Western Kentucky will surprise us, we'll see. But again, it shows that most of these sites are not very big. And so that raises a few questions that I'm gonna come to in just a moment. And this also means that we put a higher priority on conservation for our remnants that are abutting or adjacent to larger complexes of native grassland species. If we can connect these habitats to protected land or larger patches of land, we're gonna do a better job of maintaining habitat for pollinators and our native plants. So I'm just going to go through a few examples of what these things all look like. First up are just kind of some of our degraded road signs. And so the first photo you see here this is kind of the typical Kentucky roadside. If it's not a forested roadside, then you're probably looking at something like this most of the time. And as you can see, it's largely converted to cool season pasture grasses. Or it might be something like this, right? A steep embankment with lots of non-native invasive species, maybe some erosion issues or potential for erosion issues. And then the worst of all are sites like this. So this site was previously mapped and known as a site containing rare species and the remnant of a glade. So I'll talk about glades in just a slide or two. But when I visited it in 2020, it was completely overrun with chickweed, which is one of our invasive plant pests. So this is the thing we hate to see. We hate to see high quality sites that over time degrade and lose all of their significant ecological value. And then this is what our high quality road sites look like. So the one on the left is Highland Lick Prairie. This is a site that's been well known to botanists in Kentucky for a while. It has lots of large blue wild indigo and several other rare species. It's kind of the gold standard, and we're using this site as sort of a baseline that we're measuring other sites against because it really is that good of a site, and it occurs right off of a state highway in sort of south central Kentucky. And then the photo on the right is from Logan County. This was a newly found, really great remnant roadside. It had white prairie clover and cut leaf dock. And so both of those are rare plant species, rare prairie species in Kentucky. And unfortunately, what you can't see in the photo is that behind those trees on the right side of the photo was once a larger prairie complex, but it's since been graded for development. So that's another thing we hate to see is losing good prairie sites. But in this case, the right-of-way is still there. It's still sort of protected from that development because of its status as a right-of-way for utility corridors. So sometimes it works in our favor. We had identified several glade remnants. So I mentioned this before, but glades are rare habitat. They're characterized by thin rocky soils that naturally limit the growth of trees and shrubs. They often support diverse native herbs and rare species. We mapped several of those in 2020, and we visited one with KYTC staff to kind of show them what these things look like and talk with them about what sort of management they can do to help keep these glades in a healthy state. We want to do more on-site visits like this as this project progresses. And we mentioned monarchs. Monarchs are an important driver of this project. Most people know that milkweeds are the host plant for the monarch and that the monarch populations have been in decline. So I thought I'd at least mention them and just post some interesting facts about milkweeds that have come out of these surveys. There's 13 species of milkweed in Kentucky, and we've observed 12 of them right on our roadsides. So I'm hoping we get the 13th this year. And I don't have photos of them all, but I'll go through a few photos. Out of those, we had 8 new populations of purple milkweed. So this is a watch listed species. It means it's uncommon. We're trying to determine how rare it really is. And so we're working to collect data to make that assessment. And then we also updated observations of tall green milkweed, which is one of our state species of special concern in McCracken and Grayson counties. And so these are just a few examples, and you'll see that in almost every one of these photos, there's insects on the milkweed, not necessarily pollinating it. They might just be consuming nectar, but it shows that they're important for more than just monarchs. And so this is one of our green milkweeds, Asclepias viridiflorum. It's a rocky barrens specialist. This is our common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. This is world milkweed, Asclepias verticillata. So this is a very conservative, usually a great indicator of a high quality grassland species. This is one you may be familiar with. I think it's one of the more widely available commercial ones. This is Asclepias tuberosa with our zebra tigers. Yeah, that's the zebra. Shelby's gonna laugh at me later. This is our purple milkweed with a fritillary. So this is our watch list species. It's kind of a forest edge specialist. Another green milkweed, Asclepias viridis, with several different insects on it. And then this is swamp milkweed, Asclepias incarnata, with a eastern carpenter bee. And I think the other insect is a sacum, I think is the name of it. I don't know the scientific name. So we just have a few additional considerations. One question we're always asking is how small is too small for effective conservation? Like I said, many of the sites we're finding are under a quarter of an acre, and targeted management may not be worth the cost benefit of those sites, depending on what's there. So we're reviewing those as sources for seed collection that can hopefully feed into larger grassland restoration projects. And we're also always considering connectivity with larger habitat blocks when we make these assessments. There's also lots of management coordination issues. You know, if KYTC reduces mowing on a site for pollinator habitat resources, the property owner whose land abuts that site might not like it and decide to mow it themselves. So there's kind of a public outreach component there. And then there's also lots of overlapping right-of-ways with utility lines and things like that. So those are other entities that we're trying to work with to get on board with our project. And then we're always adjusting our evaluation tools to make sure they're doing the job we want them to do, and to account for different ecoregions of the state where they might not be as fine-tuned. Okay, so I mentioned ways to get involved in our citizen scientist project. I'm just going to talk briefly about this because I know I'm getting short on time. We started a project called the Kentucky Roadside Native Plants on iNaturalist. If you're not familiar with iNaturalist, it's a free application you can download onto your phone. You can start a free account, and basically you can use it to make observations of plants or animals, and then an algorithm will help you identify it, and other users will help you correctly identify that, and then you can share that location information to our project. So if you want to get involved, a great way is to add observations of roadside native plants on local and county roads, because those are the ones where our surveys aren't covering, and that can help expand our reach for this project. We've had several rare plant populations get found by people posting observations to this project, so that's been really great to see. The link is in the bottom there, and hopefully we can add it after this talk. And then I wanted to include at least a few places with grasslands for people to go see. So many of you in Oldham County may be familiar with this site. If not, the Morgan Conservation Park is a great site. It has one small remnant glade and also a prairie restoration planting. So if you're looking to familiarize yourself with prairie plants, that's one location you can look at that's close to home. And I wanted to plug the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund license plates. So those license plates, the Nature's Finest license plates, help fund the Heritage Land Conservation Fund, which is used to purchase conservation lands. It was used to help purchase part of the Morgan Conservation Park, and our agency is the one who helps administer that fund. So think about that the next time you renew your license plate. And then, so here's a photo of that prairie restoration. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. And then another site a little further away out in Shepherdsville is the Pine Creek Nature Preserve. So it's owned by the Nature Conservancy, and it has a 3-mile trail that goes through a real deal high quality remnant grassland habitat. So this isn't a restoration planting. This is like I said, a remnant grassland that supports several rare plant species. So that's another great place that you can check out that's open and free to the public. And if you're wondering, okay, I'd like to start a native pollinator garden, where should I go? What do I buy? I didn't want to plug individual nurseries, so I'm going to recommend that you visit the Kentucky Native Plant Society website. There they maintain a list of native plant nurseries, and you can kind of use that directory to help find places to source high quality native seed that has been sourced ethically if you're looking to start a native pollinator garden. And that's all I have today. I'm looking forward to continuing this project, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. And I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you both for that. Are there any questions from those on Zoom here? And I'm checking out Facebook too, if anything pops up.
Yes, Karen, it is the zebra swallowtail. I was tripping over my tongue a little bit. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I'll jump in. We've got a few minutes if anybody thinks of anything. I'm wondering if there's funding for pollinator plantings on public lands or utilities lands.
I'm not personally aware of funding sources for that. Like if you're thinking of like grant funding, I don't know of any at the moment. I'm not sure if Shelby is aware of any sources for funding for that.
Not off the top of my head, but I don't work with, I don't personally do much with plantings, but I would suggest maybe looking at websites for things like Monarch Joint Venture. They would probably have a section on, if such a thing exists, where you might look for it.
Okay. I'm also wondering, so it sounds like Kentucky Transportation Cabinet has changed a little bit as you all are working with them more in their management. Do you have like a long-term goal of, greater reduction of mowing or spraying or anything like that?
Yeah, they're moving in new directions. You've probably seen some of their pollinator habitat zones on, I think the Gene Snyder has a couple and the Hale Rogers Parkway has a few. So these are pollinator plantings that they've put in on what was formerly kind of just mowed turf right-of-ways. So that's been a positive step. As far as when we identify sites that are high quality, we're usually trying to get them to tailor the management a little differently from the rest of the right-of-way. So that usually includes mowing a narrower swath of the right-of-way to leave more unmown area and to reduce the frequency of mowing, and then trying to move away from broadcast spraying of herbicides. It is a fine balance because just due to the nature of these sites, that they're faced with a lot of challenges, particularly from noxious weeds. Roadsides tend to be really big dispersal corridors of noxious weed species. So there is a balancing act there of maintaining the high quality habitat, but not letting it go if there are noxious weed present on those sites. So yeah, that's the direction we're moving in, and we're kind of at the early phases of just gathering the information of what is there, and then hopefully developing stronger management from there.
Great. A couple of questions in the chat, or at least one. Is there funding available for private lands? We want to get rid of some of our lawn and change it to native plants. Yay.
Shelby, you looked like you wanted to answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, you might have a better answer than me, but the answer I believe is yes, but I don't know the details. And I think a lot of that depends on how much land you're talking about. My recommendation on that would be to reach out to your local extension agents, and they may be able to connect you with somebody like a Natural Resource Conservation Service, private lands biologist, or something like that, who would know the details of which specific programs you may be eligible for.
Yep.
And I can speak up. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I agree. Yeah, NRCS is a great resource, and the private lands biologists with the Division of Fish and Wildlife, they do a lot of work with private lands, and so they might be able to provide a more specific answer.
Yeah, and if you're in Oldham, I know the Conservation District at least did or currently has a cost share program. So you can check with the Soil and Water Conservation District, where they were providing a little bit of funds for those that were planting natives. And then locally with our volunteer groups, we're trying to just get more seeds out there. So seeds are always going to be a little bit more challenging than buying plants to begin with. But the more pollinator gardens we can get out there, the more sources of seeds and the more people involved, the more ability we have to spread out and get seeds to people that want them. And then just a comment in the chat, the president of the North American Butterfly Association, wow, working with Fish and Wildlife to get a plot of land reconditioned for pollinators at the Lakeside Golf Course in Lexington. That's cool. Part of Jacobson Lake on the golf course side, Lexington Park and Rec, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife are providing funding. But you've gotten local donations as well. That's really great. Appreciate you sharing that. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up? All right, well, thank you so much again, Shelby and Tony. I'll be sure to send out the recording of this and contact information. So we'll just all stay in touch in our effort to preserve native plants and help the pollinators.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you all.
Thank you all.